Have you ever considered that silence might be your most powerful weapon in spiritual battles? In this video, you'll discover how this principle, deeply rooted in biblical teachings and inspired by C.S. Lewis, can transform the way you face life's challenges. Silence isn't a sign of weakness. It's a demonstration of spiritual strength, preserving your inner peace and bringing you closer to God. Before we dive into these transformative spiritual truths, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. By doing so, you'll ensure you never miss content designed to deepen your faith and guide your spiritual growth. Join a community committed to discovering the power of peace and trust in God, one step at a time. We often find ourselves drained, trying to explain or justify our actions to people who never seem to understand. These constant struggles can exhaust us emotionally and spiritually, diverting us from the battles that truly matter. The Bible reminds us in Ephesians 6:12 that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in heavenly realms. How often have we wasted energy on meaningless conflicts, forgetting that our peace is a sacred treasure? Today, you'll learn how to shift your perspective and focus on what truly matters. In this video, we'll explore 10 transformative truths about the power of silence as a spiritual tool. You'll learn how to protect what is sacred, discern which battles are worth fighting, and preserve your inner peace amid life's challenges. Inspired by biblical wisdom and the reflections of C.S. Lewis, these practical principles will help you unlock the strength that silence can bring to your spiritual journey. Silence is not merely the absence of words, but a profound expression of wisdom and spiritual strength. Proverbs 17:28 reminds us that even a fool appears wise when they remain silent. In a noisy world where everyone feels the need to justify or explain themselves, choosing silence becomes an act of faith and discernment. Silence allows us to hear God's voice above the chaos. It helps us pause and reflect before reacting, protecting us from making impulsive decisions that could lead us away from His will. Practicing silence teaches us to respond less to human provocations and more to divine direction. Moreover, silence acts as a spiritual shield, preserving our inner peace and preventing our words from being misunderstood or used against us. In moments of conflict, choosing silence demonstrates trust in God to handle the situation rather than relying on our own strength. The purpose of silence in the Christian life is to strengthen us spiritually and draw us closer to God. It teaches us to depend on His guidance, protect our spiritual energy, and face challenges with a perspective rooted in His eternal kingdom. The Bible teaches us in Ephesians 6:12 that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This means that behind many conflicts, hurtful words, or opposition, there are unseen spiritual influences at play. Understanding this spiritual reality helps us react with wisdom and prevents us from wasting emotional energy on fruitless conflicts. A clear example can be seen in the story of Mary Magdalene in Luke 8:2. Before her deliverance, she was influenced by 7 spirits, meaning any interaction with her involved facing these spiritual forces as well. Similarly, in our lives, we often encounter situations where we're not just dealing with people but with the spiritual influences behind them. Recognizing this truth transforms how we face challenges. Instead of reacting emotionally or taking things personally, we are called to pray and seek divine wisdom to discern the true source of the conflict. This protects us from exhaustion and allows us to focus our energy on the battles that truly matter. Spiritual discernment not only helps us identify the roots of a problem, but also deepens our connection with God as we seek His guidance before taking action. By learning to discern the spiritual atmosphere, we choose the right battles and maintain our peace amid life's struggles. Not every provocation deserves a response, and often, choosing silence is an act of spiritual wisdom. Jesus provided a perfect example in Luke 23:9 when He was questioned persistently by Herod and chose not to reply. His silence was not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of trust in God's plan and a way to avoid unnecessary distractions. In our daily lives, it's easy to feel compelled to defend ourselves or justify our actions when faced with criticism or misunderstandings. However, responding to every provocation can lead to cycles of frustration and exhaustion. The Bible teaches us that silence can be a powerful response, acting as a shield to protect our inner peace and reinforce our faith. When we choose not to respond, we declare our trust in God to fight our battles. We distance ourselves from unproductive conflicts and allow Him to act on our behalf. This requires spiritual discipline, but yields abundant fruits. We preserve our emotional energy, avoid falling into the enemy's traps, and demonstrate a deep confidence in the Lord. The wisdom of not responding to every provocation frees us from the burden of constantly explaining ourselves. It reminds us that our words are not always necessary, and that sometimes silence is the most powerful tool to maintain our peace and advance on our spiritual path. Your time, energy, and spiritual calling are precious gifts entrusted to you by God. In Matthew 7:6, Jesus warns us not to give what is sacred to dogs or throw our pearls to pigs. This means we must protect the valuable things God has placed in our lives from those who cannot understand or appreciate them. Often, we find ourselves trying to justify our actions or explain our decisions to people who lack the spiritual maturity to comprehend them. These efforts not only drain our energy, but can also distract us from the mission God has assigned to us. Protecting what is sacred means learning to discern with whom and when to share the spiritual treasures we've received. When we spend time and energy on unproductive arguments or conflicts, we neglect what truly matters: our peace, our calling, and our relationship with God. Jesus calls us to value what He has given us and not to squander it on situations that don't build us up. Preserving what is sacred requires wisdom, discernment, and trust in God. It means prioritizing what has eternal value and recognizing that not everyone is ready to receive the truth we carry. By protecting what God has entrusted to us, we honor His trust and remain faithful to the purpose He has given us. It's natural to want to justify ourselves when we feel misunderstood or unfairly criticized, but this tendency can become a spiritual trap. Jesus taught His disciples an important lesson in Matthew 10:14. Instructing them to shake the dust off their feet if they were not welcomed. This act symbolizes that we shouldn't insist on being understood by those who aren't spiritually ready to listen. Trying to explain our actions to people who cannot comprehend them is not only fruitless, but can also drain us emotionally and spiritually. These conversations often turn into endless cycles of frustration, pulling us away from our true spiritual priorities. Recognizing when to stop justifying ourselves requires discernment and humility. It's not about giving up or admitting defeat, but trusting that God will reveal the truth in His perfect timing. He knows the hearts and circumstances better than we ever could, and we can rest in His wisdom. When we stop seeking validation from others and place our trust in God, we find peace and clarity. By avoiding the exhaustion of constantly explaining ourselves, we preserve our spiritual energy and stay focused on what truly matters, fulfilling the purpose God has set before us. If this message about the power of silence is resonating with you, consider giving this video a like. It not only helps more people discover this content, but also strengthens our faith-driven community. Share your thoughts in the comments. When have you experienced the power of silence in your life? Your insights could inspire and encourage others on their spiritual journey. Silence is not merely the absence of words. It's a profound demonstration of faith and trust in God. Exodus 14:14 declares, "The Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still." This verse reminds us that in moments of conflict or uncertainty, silence can be a powerful expression of our belief that God is in control. When we choose to remain silent in the face of adversity, we declare our trust in God's sovereignty to resolve the situation. This silence is not passivity, it's an active posture of faith that protects us from impulsive reactions and preserves our inner peace. Silence also creates space to hear God's guidance. Instead of reacting out of emotion, we seek His direction for decisions aligned with His will. By practicing this kind of silence, we not only conserve our emotional energy, but also deepen our spiritual connection with Him. Trusting God through silence requires spiritual maturity and discipline, but it yields abundant rewards. It frees us from the exhaustion of trying to resolve everything on our own and allows us to witness how God works on our behalf. In this way, silence becomes a powerful tool to face challenges and a declaration of our unwavering confidence in God's plan for our lives. The Bible offers countless examples where silence becomes a powerful tool of faith and spiritual victory. One of the most striking is Jesus before Pilate in Matthew 27:14. Despite the false accusations against Him, Jesus chose not to reply. This act wasn't weakness, but a profound demonstration of trust in the Father's plan. By remaining silent, Jesus avoided distractions and stayed focused on his eternal mission. Another significant example is Mary Magdalene in Luke 8:2, who was under the influence of 7 spirits before her deliverance. Engaging with her at that time meant confronting not just her, but the spiritual forces controlling her. This reminds us that many conflicts we face are not just about people, but about the unseen spiritual influences behind them. These examples teach us that silence isn't a sign of defeat, but a strategy of spiritual wisdom. It allows us to preserve our authority, protect our peace, and avoid engaging in conflicts that don't edify. By following Jesus' example and choosing silence in critical moments, we demonstrate a mature faith and a deep understanding that God is always in control. Silence is not just a pause. It is a tool that protects our spiritual authority and prevents us from falling into the traps set by the enemy. Evil spirits are not omniscient like God, but they observe and listen, seeking to twist our words and use them against us. By choosing silence, we limit their ability to manipulate our actions and preserve our spiritual position. A clear example is found in Mark 1:25, when Jesus confronted a man possessed by an impure spirit. When the spirit attempted to engage in conversation, Jesus simply said, "Be quiet, come out of him." There was no argument or unnecessary explanation. This demonstrates that sometimes the most powerful response is refusing to give the enemy a foothold. Silence also protects our inner peace, keeping us from wasting energy on fruitless debates or conflicts. It helps us stay focused on what truly matters and strengthens our connection with God. Each time we choose silence, we are declaring our trust that He will fight our battles and guide us to victory. Preserving our spiritual authority requires wisdom and discernment, and silence is one of the most effective tools for achieving this. Not every battle needs to be fought with words. Often silence is the greatest display of strength and faith in God. Silence acts as a powerful shield, protecting us from the distractions the enemy uses to divert our attention from what truly matters. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Yet we often waste time and energy engaging in surface-level conflicts, forgetting the true spiritual nature of our battles. The enemy knows that if he cannot stop us, he will try to distract us. These distractions often come in the form of unnecessary arguments or misunderstandings that drain our emotional energy and pull us away from our divine mission. A clear example of this is Eve's conversation with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Instead of rejecting the serpent's words, Eve was drawn into a dialogue that led to her downfall. Silence allows us to filter what deserves our attention and what doesn't. By choosing not to respond to provocations or meaningless conflicts, we conserve our energy and sharpen our focus on the battles that have eternal value. This act of discernment not only protects our inner peace, but also strengthens our connection with God, who guides us to true spiritual victories. Silence is not just a spiritual practice, but a powerful tool you can incorporate into your daily life to protect your peace and strengthen your connection with God. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." This verse reminds us that silence is not passive, it's an active source of spiritual power. To apply this wisdom in your life, start by praying for discernment. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. This step will help you identify situations where your words may be unnecessary or even counterproductive. Dedicate specific moments to practicing silence in prayer. These quiet times allow you to hear God's voice and gain clarity on the challenges you face. By silencing the noise of the world, you open yourself to revelations that can strengthen your faith and help you act wisely. Finally, protect your peace by choosing your battles carefully. Not every conversation deserves your energy, and not everyone is ready to receive what you have to share. By trusting God and practicing silence, you conserve your energy and focus on what truly matters, fulfilling the purpose He has set for you. Each time you choose silence instead of engaging in unnecessary arguments or justifying yourself, you take a step closer to a life of peace and trust in God. Take a moment to reflect. How much energy have you spent on conflicts that didn't build you up, trying to convince people who weren't ready to listen? By choosing silence, you make room for God to work on your behalf. Silence isn't a sign of defeat. It's an expression of spiritual maturity. It shows that you trust in God's perfect plan, even when circumstances seem challenging. Letting Him fight your battles and guide your steps brings a peace that the world cannot offer. Today, commit yourself to practicing silence as a spiritual tool. As you do, you'll see your perspective shift and experience how God moves in your life in ways you never imagined. Remember, in quietness and trust lies your true strength. If this message about the power of silence has resonated with you, take a moment to engage with this community. Like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss content designed to strengthen your faith and guide your spiritual journey. Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you plan to apply silence in your daily life? Your reflections can inspire others to grow in their faith and discover the strength that comes from trusting in God. Together, we can walk toward a life filled with peace and purpose. Silence is not weakness. It is a declaration of strength and trust in God. As Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, in quietness and trust is your strength. This silence allows us to preserve our peace, protect what is sacred, and let God fight the battles we cannot win on our own. As you reflect on what you've learned today, remember that every time you choose silence in the face of conflict, you demonstrate a mature faith and create space for God to act on your behalf. He is faithful and will never leave you alone in the struggles that truly matter. Let silence be a tool that connects you more deeply with God and gives you clarity in the midst of life's storms. Thank you for joining us in this time of reflection. May God abundantly bless you, and never forget, silence, when entrusted to God, always leads to victory. Until next time.